Matt Steffy is with us. He's joined us. And one note here that it's over. It's through. Internet Explorer will no longer function after today. So I'm just giving you people a heads up. If that's how you're getting your MySpace, Internet Explorer will no longer function after today. Microsoft is retiring the Internet Explorer nearly 30 years after its launch. The web browser will be no more after today. Instead, attempts to open the apps will take you to the Microsoft Edge, just to let you know what's going on if there's that one person still using that browser. Matt, good morning, sir. How are you doing? Everything okay?
Yeah, everything's fine. I'm just lamenting the loss of Internet Explorer. I guess it'll go to the AOL graveyard.
Do you remember the sound of a fax machine when it was connecting? And also the Internet?
Oh, yes, I do.
Do you remember when we first got on, we had limited time? I think it was a certain amount of time you could stay on.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Metered Internet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember before the computer screen showed, it still showed code when I wanted to type a document.
That's true. And there was, as far as creativity, there was almost nothing you could do unless you knew code back then. You know, to put something in bold, you had to put it's like the guy's trash compactor on the lead-in to the segment. You press the triangle on either end of a word, and maybe it would turn out bold when you printed it. We've come so far so fast that, you got somebody who's 35 or 40 years old, they're saying, do you remember? That's how fast technology is moving. So
it's true. My son, who's will be 30 this December, is just on the seam of enough shift in technology where he feels a little of that difference with his newer coworkers who are in their early to mid 20s.
My better half at work had many years ago had one of the very first computers. I had a Macintosh, one of those standalones, but she had one was called it was by Canon. A little bit later on, we had a Radio Shack with a TRS-80 and the printer that sounded like a train coming through. You had all the paper was attached. You had it perforated, and you had to tear it apart as far as the printer paper. But that Canon
printer, that's another.
It was crazy. That Canon was you would type 3 words and then sit back and look and wait for them to form. It took that long. All right, stop reminiscing. What are we doing here? 2 old guys reminiscing about yesterday. Let's get to this as far as the Supreme Court, because I know you guys in class and when you were in class, you guys were this had to be a big topic of what's going on now. But give me your overview of where we are as far as when they're going to do this, what they're going to do, and your thoughts on the Supreme Court and the Roe versus Wade.
Well, when they're going to do it is typically the end of June.
Mm-hmm.
The most significant opinions tend to come out last, and we expect that now to be a matter of a couple of weeks. So I think before we break for the July 4th weekend, we'll have the opinion in hand, but not much before that.
Yeah.
And that's been the expectation all along. Even with the leak of Justice Alito's draft opinion, it seemed to suggest things were on schedule for release in late June, because once an opinion is drafted, it has to circulate among other members of the court, and particularly members of the court who are joining the opinion, who may have offer suggestions, who may offer the comments of the sort, put this in or I won't join, or take this out of the opinion or I won't join. They have a principal offer, but are in some sense a collective effort. So that takes some period of months to work itself out. then a dissent goes through a similar process, or dissents. Sometimes, and I think this leak is generally thought, as I'm sure you all have discussed, to try to guard against and a preventative or preemptive strike against the sort of thing that happened in the Casey decision 20 years ago, which was early indications within the court or that Roe was going to be overturned, and then a late change of mind by Justice Kennedy resulted in the outcome that we have.
Do you think because of all of this that public, do you think because of all of the brouhaha and the leak, the opinions have changed from that draft?
I think the opinions have changed from the draft because they've always changed from the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I think the brouhaha was designed to keep the changes to the margins. When you have 9 people with life tenure and autonomy and a little sense that they're treated like philosopher kings, anything's possible. But I would expect the opinion to be more or less like what we saw. Like, I would expect the differences to be small.
Mm-hmm.
That's assuming one of the members of that, one of the people joining that opinion wasn't wavering to begin with.
I understand.
Sometimes people,
where's the leaker? Apparently everybody in Washington knows who the leaker is, and then they're setting up committees and investigative processes to go out and do a large, big study, deep throat type study of who the leaker is. And apparently everybody knows. Why hasn't the leaker been leaked and fired?
Well, that assumes the leaker acted without permission.
Whoa! From one of the Supreme Court justices?
Well, the leaker, one theory was that the leaker is a clerk acting with the implicit consent of their justice.
Is that against the law?
I don't think it's against any criminal law.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably against something in the employee handbook, and can certainly get you fired. But
for justice, well, wait a minute. Wait. For justice is not an ethics violation?
That's not as clear as you might think.
That's strange.
Because ethics violations usually involve
mm-hmm.
a breach of a duty to a client. And while justices can get in ethical problems for kind of self-dealing, I don't know. I do think there's an ethical problem, but it's not a criminal problem. It's not an actionable problem.
I've got a couple of other questions here, too, so I want to push you along because we just don't have enough time to spend together, and I wish we were doing this in studio for a whole roundtable like we used to do. But the other part of that is, and I think you've already answered that question, that you think that the opinion will mirror the leaked draft with possibly some minor changes.
That's what I think. Recognizing that anything can happen, that's, I think, the likeliest outcome.
I got two other things I want to ask you about. One is the NIL, the name image licensing, and the other is the DAs and the bail bonds things. And we got a short segment, but I'm see if we can squeeze those two things in. Back with the fertile mind of the one and only law professor at Mississippi College, Matt Steffy, when we return. Final segment with the law professor at Mississippi College, Matt Steffy. Matt, did you guys ever get involved as far as your department over at Mississippi College with NIL offering advice, et cetera, et cetera?
I didn't. I'm not an intellectual property professor. I followed the story with some interest, and I don't know whether there's any folks in the athletic department or university council that deals with it.
I was going to pick your brain on that one. We'll march on. The problem. Oh, it is, and my thought is, I wonder if we did this too early because there's so many unanswered questions. You know, it's like
we did it too early. We did it, but that's the NCAA's fault. They resisted the inevitable.
It is that, along with marijuana and all the unanswered questions, because I could ask 1,000 questions on marijuana, and it's going to be up to the courts to really continue to shape this law through lawsuits and everything else for a long time to come. Is there a practice dedicated solely to that venture? As far as
I think there's a practice that would be under the umbrella of sports agents that would have a focus on that. So, yes, basically, but they would also do other aspects of representation, like negotiating contracts.
It's very true. Yeah. There's some guys who wanted to be an athlete, and they had a good legal mind, and Papa wanted them to become a lawyer, and they made good livings in sports.
Like that.
Yeah. Absolutely. We had one other here. Here is just one note that I wanted to let you hear, if you can hear this.
With regard to the leniency of prosecutors, that has, on balance, not been the biggest problem. The leniency of prosecutors.
In
the past, the hardest process has been the intensity of prosecutors. People getting long sentences for crimes that are, anyway. And bail reform, I think bail reform and the negative side of bail reform is vastly overrated. The idea that if you have no ability to make bail because you're poor, it should relate to the severity of the crime and what the problem is related that you're accused of.
Whether you like him or don't like him, that's some of the problems right there, because DAs who have not been doing their jobs, many of them have been appointed or backed by George Soros, and secondly, cities that have not only defunded the police, but they've banned bail bonds. And those two things are leading to an unbelievable increase in crime. Your thoughts?
Well, I think there's a lot to unpack in there, and I'm not sure the elimination of cash bail has been shown to balloon crime. I think the problem is we vacillate between lock them all up before trial and let them all out before trial.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a resourcing issue, but we can be smarter about who gets left on their own recognizance with conditions that can include electronic monitoring and frequent reporting, right? It's not as if you have to let them go and never see them again, and high bond. But there's constitutional principle, of course, that we are presumed innocent, and that bond can't be used punitively. The real purpose of bond is to make sure people return for trial. It's not it can't be a primary tool of crime prevention or law enforcement. And so we can use conditions other than incarceration, particularly electronic tools, I think, to get to an end that makes sense for everybody.
Yeah. Let me final
people accused of a crime without detaining them and punishing them before trial.
Mm-hmm. Final question. We mentioned earlier, and Lindsey Graham was talking about this, if it is against the law for you to even peacefully protest outside a juror's home or the Supreme Court justices, why aren't people being arrested? It either is against the law or it is not. What do you mean? You're a law professor.
Well, I don't. I have a rather encyclopedic area of many areas of the law, but I don't have it in all jurisdictions. Some jurisdictions may have local laws, for example, that prevent you from protesting in front of state Supreme Court justices.
Yeah.
But a lot of those laws would be misdemeanors.
Yeah. Spoken like a lawyer.
Misdemeanors or violations.
Look forward to getting you in the studio, and we'll hopefully do that soon. I thank you, sir, as always, Matt. Matt Steffy. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Good to see you. Have a great summer.
Pleasure.